have such sights to show you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Four Dead Losers podcast. We are the Four Dead Losers. I'm Renito.
Adam.
Jordan.
And we have Justin, who's out sick right now. So let's go ahead and hope that he has a speedy recovery. A few housekeeping things. We were going to do few housekeeping things. We were going to do an episode over Blood and Honey 2. We weren't satisfied with the way that recording came out. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of bury that one away.
That movie sucked.
I liked it. I want to put that up there.
Yeah, we did not enjoy that movie except for Jordan. Jordan did.
Of course.
Do you remember what your rating was?
I think it was a 6.5.
6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, it might be low, maybe a 7. I'll stick with 6.5.
I think the two of us rated it 3 out of 10 or something.
I think I was like a 2.
I think so.
Like a 2.
It was pretty bad, not enjoyable. As far as we go, you enjoyed it, yay!
But it's still not a lot to talk about, though.
Yeah,
it is what it is. So.
So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna skip over that episode, and today we're gonna be talking about Heretic. Yay! How exciting! A24's latest horror movie. Non-spoiler thoughts, Adam. What did you think of the movie?
I thought the movie was pretty good. It did a lot of I don't know. I don't know. I think it just set a really good tone, and it was consistent. I think that was the big thing for me. Like everything from just overall pacing to the acting to the storyline and all the nuances. I thought everything was there. I didn't feel like anything was necessarily extra. I didn't feel like there was anything that was, that kind of got it off track or was out of the norm for what the movie was pushing towards. And so I think that was actually probably a bonus for me, being able to sit through that movie and be I can say I sat and enjoyed that because it actually was very cohesive and well thought out. So I think for me that was a good movie.
Yeah.
I would say my rating is probably around I'd say maybe 8.5 out of 10, only just for the replayability. I think would be the only thing for me. While it is a good movie, I don't think I would just immediately go back and watch it, but it is a good movie nonetheless. I could see myself later on down the road being hey, I'm gonna watch this again because it's just a good movie. So.
Yeah. That's fair. Jordan, non-spoiler thoughts. What did you think?
I agree with basically all of that. I don't have much to add. I think this is the first movie in a while where all the main stars were actually good and had good dialogue and good
all 3 of them were really good.
There's really only 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, I guess it makes it easier, but yeah, it stayed interesting. I agree that the replay value might be if I'm inviting people over, I'm not going to pull that movie out. But I thought it was interesting. I think it's unique. I'll probably go with an 8.5 also.
Okay. Non-spoiler thoughts for myself. I enjoyed this movie too. I watched it twice. So one of them, when it had first come out, the second one was to prep for this episode, and I noticed a lot more for this one than I did the first watch through. And that was more because I was looking for certain things, you know what I mean? Overall, I really enjoyed it. We can talk more. We're going to get into, the specifics that we liked. But for myself, I'd probably have to give it a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was above average. There were points the first half of the movie I really liked, but once they get to the destination or whatever, it kind of fell off for a little bit for me, and then the ending didn't quite do it for me, if I'm gonna be honest. But I really liked the setup. I thought that was amazing. Act 1 was really good. So we're gonna go ahead and get to the spoiler section of the video. Go ahead, if you don't want to be spoiled, you can comment, subscribe, do all the algorithm stuff, and then find us later on to come back and hear what we have to say about it. But until then, this is your spoiler warning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get into it. A short summary of what's going on is we have 2 Mormon sisters, not because they're not nuns, right? They're sisters.
They're just sisters.
We have Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, and they're on mission, which, if you're unfamiliar with what that is in the Mormon church, they essentially pair up 2 individuals and they go and try to spread their religion is what's going on. I think they did a really good analogy of saying in the movie, Mr. Reed, who's the other character, the third main character, he says that the sisters are essentially door-to-door salespeople for the Mormon church. And you essentially get that. So they arrive at his house, at Mr. Reed's house, and then he invites them in. They have a conversation where they kind of, at first, he seems really open to like what they have to say, but you can barely like within minutes of them arriving, right, or something, he like turns the conversation to be more debate-like than him, interested in joining. Eventually, they get creeped out. They want to head out. He's like, okay, cool, you can leave whenever, blah, 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 blah. Turns out they can't. They end up in the second room in the back of the house. In that room, that's when the real, quote unquote, debate happens. Mr. Reed drops some, in my opinion, truth bombs on the sisters. Things get a little more, standoffish, that kind of stuff. They end up going into the next room, and the next room is the basement. Apparently, there's a way out from there. That's the thing that he keeps telling them is if you want to leave, you can go through this door. If you want to leave, you can go through that door, XYZ. And we'll get into more about like what that is. So when they're in the basement, the cellar, or whatever you want to call it, from that point, it's very much like there's a very like tone switch in the movie, right? It goes from more of a, I guess, thought-provoking conversation to like, no, you're in my basement. I'm going to keep you here until you do something.
This is when a lot of the horror elements come out.
Yeah. And so pretty much it, right? The Sister Barnes, who's played by Sophia Thatcher, she ends up getting offed, and then Sister Paxton makes it through. She basically plays the game with Mr. Reed and makes her way out. And then, there's some convoluted things that happen in the end. We'll go ahead and get to, I personally want to talk about it. But the first thing, pros and cons, what did y'all think?
I would say again for me, the pros being, I thought the pacing was fine. I thought that everything kind of just kept on streamlining. I could see where maybe like the second act, or in my opinion, probably the third act, was probably where it got a little like kind of like you're saying convoluted or weird. But I mean, to me, it made logical sense that was going to at some point happen, right? Because after a certain point, you can only quote unquote debate or do whatever so much until like really it goes into him getting into his game or whatever, like you were saying. And so I thought that was a pro, just the pacing overall. The other things that I really did enjoy was again, the acting was good. I enjoyed the thoughtfulness of like certain aspects of like him in the house and how he does things, like the big one being like the lock on the door for the front door. He has like a timer that we don't see, but I think we had seen him once or twice where he did fidget with essentially the thermostat.
Yeah.
But
It's the light switch.
The light switch. But what ends up happening is the light switch behind the actual switch itself ends up, because it's a timer switch, by the way. It's not like a flick on and off. It's like a timer where you set it for a certain amount of minutes or whatever. And so you have to open it to like adjust it or whatever to unlock or lock the main front door. And so obviously for people that are trying to get out, they don't have any clue, right? They just think that that's a light switch. So that was, I thought, really interesting. The whole I don't know. I think out of all of them, I think Hugh Grant probably did the best. I mean, I think that's where most of the money went, probably in the movie. And I think that he did a very good job of portraying the villain in this movie. And I think he did a phenomenal job setting again the tone and setting the overall just unsettling environment for like pretty much the entire movie, even through the end when it get a little kind of like weird. But like I thought that was good. But I'll say the only cons for me were there just a couple like loose thread things that like never really got fully resolved. So like there was the whole incident with the father, or like the main church person, right? Like the elder, like he went to go searching for them, and then I think he did notice that their bikes were there, but then like no, he didn't notice.
No, he didn't notice.
Oh, that's right, they're gone. That's right,
They're gone.
They're gone. But what I was gonna say was like we never saw anything after that. Like he never pushed past that. It was just like, oh, it kind of was like he accepted they were gone.
Yeah, and so like one of the reasons why, and you'll hear more about it in my prose, but one of the reasons why I think that choice was really good was because they essentially like showed how women are treated in the Mormon religion, right? That it's very much like, oh hey, I'm gonna go check up on him, but I'm not gonna do much digging after that. Like it's very what am I trying to say?
I know what you're trying to say.
Yes.
I noticed somebody mentioned online that like he doesn't really notice that they're gone until he's having to like clean the bathroom or whatever. Like, which is probably something he doesn't normally do. I do also think that he was.
Well, it was like their punch cards, right? Like they have like certain cards
Yeah.
and stuff, and they weren't signed. So
Like their chore list.
chore list, yeah.
So I think part of it's like the metaphorical, like, right, he's not gonna save you. Like they're helpless and they're hoping to be saved, and he's just not that guy, even though he might pretend to be or whatever.
Right.
But also a big like plot point is to show that the bikes are gone or whatever.
Yeah. And I kind of forgot about that. Say the other cons for me were I thought the ending was a little kind of weird in the whole like surprise. Here's where the entity, not entities, but like the what are they called?
Prophets.
Prophets came, or how they were them, and like I get what the purpose was because they thought that out, but I was kind of like, oh, okay, that just seems kind of like meh, but it's like it's whatever, I get it. I wasn't like the biggest fan of like that particular choice. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then the ending I thought was okay, but I don't know, it was just kind of like silly. I think too the other con for me was the other sister kind of re-emerging, right? Like that was kind of I mean, horror movie stock, whatever, but like there's no way you got up from that,
So that's a point that I want to talk about later. That we'll get into later.
I agree.
so
I had the same reaction upon first watch, and then I did like some research or whatever. And I have a different.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
my other con, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Pros and cons.
Pros, I think that Hugh Grant's performance was great, which I
Yes.
think we all agree on. He really keeps. I think a lot of the pacing and stuff, and like the tension and the uneasy feeling, all goes through him. And I think, I don't know. I'm not gonna say nobody else could have done that performance, but he really nails it. I like the religious elements. I think it's rare we get a movie like this. Usually we'll get like an Immaculate or a First Omen, where it's always like any religious horror movie is always about a nun or a priest or.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a different take on that. I also think you mentioned it a little bit, like when we get to his main room, which I'm assuming is like the second act too.
Mm-hmm.
That like the set design and the sound design, you can tell there's a lot of research that went into it,
Yeah.
and like in what he's talking about and stuff. So I think that's all pros for me. I don't remember which sister's which, but one of them has magic underwear.
They both do.
Oh, you're right. In this case, you're right.
Yes, they're Mormons. They
That's a
both
pro.
do.
Come on. No. Cons. I do agree. Upon first watch, there were certain things that kind of felt odd to me, or I had to go do more research. I was hoping to see it a second time, but all the showtimes were like when I was busy.
Yeah.
So, I also think the second act had a lot of great parts when they're in like the basement. I'm assuming we would call it. I think there was some thought-provoking parts. There was also some parts where it was kind of shaky. Like I'm assuming that's why your rating is lower than ours, because that part probably didn't hit as well for you. But overall, I don't have a lot of cons for it. I think it was a lot of pros, and I don't really have anything negative to say.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, that's fair. Pros for myself. The actors were great. I thought. I feel like. So. Just to get a little vulnerable with y'all, the audience, a little bit of insight on myself. I am very proud to call myself an atheist. So Hugh Grant's character, I felt so bad, and the reason why is because I agreed with a lot of his points while watching the movie, but I had to reel myself back in. Like I had to mentally reel myself back in and say like, no, I can't agree with this guy because he's the villain, right? And then everything that happens in the second act, yeah, no, I'm okay.
Yeah, agree. It's easier to separate yourself, but I agree. Like when he's giving that whole monologue, it's like it really hit for me. So
yes. So there's a portion of the movie that I think we've all kind of mentioned in passing where he throws out his argument, right? Which is basically like there's only one true religion and it's not XYZ. And there's a whole like analogy that he uses where he says like the Judaism is what is it? The landlord's game, which is the original thought for Monopoly. Christianity is Monopoly itself, and then Islam is the next iteration of Monopoly, which I don't know what it is.
Bob Ross, your favorite. One of them was Bob Ross.
That was the Mormon.
They were just like they're all like they kind of spin off.
Yeah.
But I think like going to that, I think the idea though was like the idea of like how can this be one thing and but this came first, like the idea that like this particular one came first, yet everybody chooses this one. Because really, me up to that point, I'm like, I've never heard of what was it called? Landlords. I was like, I've never heard of that. But he even brought it up, and then he brought up other iterations of similar things to other things, right? Like he'd use a song, forget which particular song.
I don't remember, but it's Creep. It's something,
Creep,
and
then
something.
I think it's
Creep, and then Lana Del Rey.
Yeah. And so like just basically using that, and I was just like, that's not completely wrong. Like I totally I can see that when something picks off of it and makes it more popular, like that's the thing that most people gravitate towards, right? And so that's kind of the interesting thing. Like I know looking back now again, I'd have to really dig deep, but like I'm sure Watchmen wasn't the first like super deep like dark heroes thing type deal, but like that's the one that made it well known, and that's the one people gravitate towards. And I'm sure there's things prior to that did the same thing, but just didn't get the reception that it did from, whatever. But saying that, although Alan Moore didn't push his stuff, like that. Honestly, he actually like pushing his stuff.
Yeah, like the context of that was essentially because the girls were trying to push that, like Mormonism or Latter-day Saints or whatever is like the one true religion. So his argument is all about like, what's clear that all these things, even like historical figures, like in caves and stuff, all have this same like theme or overarching story.
Yeah, and he brings out like my favorite part of the movie. He has like this the corner of his room where he has a curtain covering it, and he shows you what's behind the curtain, right? And there's like I think it's a dozen other deities that have similarities to Jesus Christ, right? Born of a virgin. We're carpenters, we're dead, and we're resurrected, or whatever. And then what does he say? He goes, could you imagine in 1,000 years when everybody looks at Jar Jar Binks as the major religion?
And he gets the impression, bro.
Yeah, he goes,
pretty impressive.
He said Jar Jar.
I know, I don't know that Jar Jar Lord.
He goes, squeeze me.
I was gonna say there were some points in this. I would say my only other con thinking about it now was that and this is not a him in this movie thing, it was just that my mind can separate it, was the knowing that the last film I saw him in was Wonka. So like for me he was just an Oompa Loompa, right? So I'm just imagining an Oompa Loompa saying all this stuff.
See, I didn't know that going into it. I saw Wonka, but I didn't realize it was the same person.
It's the same person.
He's a little more orange.
He's a little bit more orange. He's a little bit shorter. He's about like
I do feel that there's a lot of criticisms that the movie makes about religion that I really appreciated. One of the biggest things, we're not a theological podcast, so I'm not going to get into everything, but just to name a few things, is that like one of the things that happens in the movie in the initial setup is that Mr. Reed brings the sisters soda, right? And it's a big thing that like Mormons can't have coffee or whatever. I think it's first off, it started as hot drinks, so that eliminated coffee and tea, and then it turned into caffeine, and then they're like, well, it actually doesn't say anything about soda. Anyways, that's besides the point. There are a lot of other things where it really brought out that like a lot of religions just cherry pick what they decide to believe in, and I really enjoyed that. Them pointing that out. There was just a bunch of stuff like that where I found the reason why I had to reel myself back from relating with Mr. Reed. And so I guess we can get into my cons, right? Is that I don't know which way this movie leans. I don't know if it leans pro-religion or anti.
I almost feel like it's purposely, and that's what threw me off because I have a similar lens to you, where like the ending kind of felt pro-religion to me until I like went back and did research after, and I feel like a lot of it is, even though like in the first half with Hugh Grant or whatever his character, the kind of like anti-Mormonism or anti-religious theme is kind of stronger. I do think a lot of it is the directors purposely leave it kind of neutral to where like somebody with a different lens than us might view it as pro-religious or we view it as anti.
Mm-hmm.
But even like with the doors going down to the basement, it's like you can choose to believe or not believe, but they all lead the same place, which I think is a big commentary on like the ending too, which we're going to talk about in a different segment. Like, kind of all leads to the same.
Yeah, it leads to the same place. And then, yeah, there's just some more stuff that I can get into, but I'll just leave it.
Let's go extended episode.
I guess that jump us to the ending then.
I think first we had the dynamic between the sisters and Reed, which we kind of touched on a little bit, but I don't know if you have more comments on that.
I'll say with dynamics, I thought, well, first of all, I like that they did the swerve on us. I feel like it doesn't happen enough, but it's good when it doesn't happen as often because then it wouldn't be as fresh. But they almost set up, what is it, the sister's name, not Paxton, the Barnes. They set up Barnes as being like what you would think would be the one that's gonna sort of like make it.
Yeah,
you think it, and then they swerve on you, and it's actually Paxton. And I thought that was really good because even the way that the director and the writer have Paxton's character go through most of the movie, it almost lends to that, where it's like, yeah, Paxton's not gonna make it because Paxton's the one that is very like, almost like the naive one, because it's not Paxton that's figuring out a lot of these things, it's Barnes. So like the initial kind of creep factor of like going in and her consistently trying to like figure out where the wife is, because that's a big thing, right? It's like they can't be in the house without another female presence, like a safety thing, right? And so
it's a rule.
Yeah. So yeah, and so like they do it under the false pretense that he says, "Oh, my wife's just inside cooking. Like you'll meet her for sure." And that's the thing, right? Like he always continually like finds a way to like delay them into like to where they give him more information before they ask again. And it's really mainly again Barnes, the one that keeps on prodding. And she starts seeing certain things, like because his first excuse is, "Oh, my wife is making blueberry pie." And then she notices because he lights a candle, they do whatever. And then when he leaves like the second time to go in the kitchen, which his kitchen, by the way, is like, he has to go through this hallway to this other hallway, and he opens like a door that's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre door that's like heavy open, heavy close.
Sorry, this is just an interesting thing. We never see the kitchen.
Yeah, you never see the kitchen.
Never
sorry, like, there's no kitchen. He doesn't eat. And so he doesn't eat. And so he basically he leaves, and she turns the candle around and sees that it's blueberry pie. So like the whole idea and premise, she's starting to figure out this is not a good place to be. And even then, like even Barnes are getting a little, not Barnes, but Paxton's getting a little uncomfortable, but not as uncomfortable as Barnes, because she's starting to like slowly figure out like, okay, this guy's obviously has no interest in learning about it, because like you said, pretty quickly he kind of starts flipping it more times than not, either to questions that are just a little, not I wouldn't say off the cuff, but like are very like, has either nothing to do with what they're talking about or is just really kind of personal, to also like being, like you're saying, pushy towards like, hey, like almost debating, but not really. Because then he always sets it up nicely too, like he almost gaslights him, right? It's like, oh, well, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, or like, oh, this may be a little forward, but I'm just curious. Like he just,
what do you think about polygamy?
Yeah, like just
outright self.
Yeah, he's ridiculous about like just the way he sets it up. He sets it up in a way that like, you don't have to answer, or like, if you answer, it's whatever, but I'm just curious, kind of like trying to do it in the least like pushy way, but it still comes off that way. So I think that dynamic is interesting. And again, I think the sister dynamic where Paxton is kind of at first the gullible one, and Barnes is the one trying to get her to like see, hey, look, we need to go. And then once she's on board, then it's problematic, because when they get to the second room, Barnes is like, she's done. She's like, no, I just want to get out of here. You need to be upfront with us, blah, 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 blah. And I think even Paxton's like almost willing to give in, like, look, I'll say whatever you want. Like, what door do you want us to go through? We'll go through that door.
Yeah, so the thing that we keep saying about the door is that Reed tells them, like, hey, there's two doors in the room. or I guess 3, right? The one that they enter from. But there's 2 doors that we haven't seen what's behind, and one of them, after he gives this big old long spiel about
Believe.
belief, and there only being one true religion, and the whole argument is that iterations dilute the message of the original.
Right.
And so the 2 doors, one of them has the word belief written on it, and the other one has the word disbelief written on it. And so,
Yeah, and so that's, I think, important because that's where, again, Paxton, I think, the one that ends up surviving, is the one that is like, I think she ends up going with belief, right?
I think
she
she
ends
goes
up
disbelief.
disbelief at first because she ends up. Sorry, they end up going through separate doors. Sister Barnes originally wants to go through the belief door. Sister Paxton wants to go through the disbelief door because it seems as this entire conversation is him trying to convince him that their religion is wrong.
Yeah.
Which I guess you can see it that way.
Yeah. Right. And then they end up, like you're saying, they end up flipping. But Paxton almost does it too, right? Where she wants to she just whatever, so I don't care, just we'll pick one, right? And then they end up flipping, flopping. But surprise, they all end up leading to the same basement, which they find out pretty quickly once they get down there that it didn't matter which door you picked.
Mm-hmm. I do want to point out though that so we get a shot when they're walking down the stairs, and I think Sister Barnes is before Paxton. But they both turn around because you see the silhouette, of Mr. Reed in the doorway, and he closes the door on them. So the reason why I kept referring to things as playing games and stuff like that is because that shot reminded me of the ending of the first Saw movie where Jigsaw closes the door on him. I don't know why. Those movies have nothing to do with each other, but
it's basically, do you want to play a game? Except they didn't have a choice. They're just they're in the game.
Well, I mean, do the people in Saw have a choice?
Yeah, they should have made those 4 choices.
Yeah, should have been religion. No,
they should have not made their poor choices, and Jigsaw would have messed with them.
Yeah, I really like their dynamic, and it happens from the beginning where Barnes is the more forward one, right?
Barnes, what do you mean by forward?
She's the one who's kind of the leader of it.
Yeah, she's kind of.
I just want to make sure I know who is who.
Barnes is the brunette.
Yes,
Paxton.
Because even in the beginning, Paxton's the one who gets bullied about the underwear. It's Barnes comes across as the leader, and Paxton's just kind of going along with whatever she's doing. Even when they're in the house, it's clear that Barnes is catching on to things.
Yeah,
and Paxton is kind of just going off her vibe. And I think a big switch happens after they enter the room. I'm pretty sure Paxton is the one that notices that the lady was different.
Yeah, so what happens is that Mr. Reed, once they're in the basement, Mr. Reed sends another person into the room, and this other person that walks in, she's has this white cloak, right, or something like that.
It's all gray. It's not even white.
And she's holding a pie, and in the cellar there's a table with a single chair, and so she starts eating the pie. As she's eating it, Mr. Reed comes over an intercom that he has in 4th room, where he explains that in there is poison. So the person who's eating the pie, he describes as a prophet of God, and that they're all going to witness a miracle that today, right? And so that the person's going to eat the poison, they're going to pass to the other side, and then they're going to come back
and tell you what they saw.
Yeah, tell you what they saw, and then XYZ.
Yeah, and at that moment, I'm pretty sure when they come back, right, they get distracted with something, which I'll touch on, which that has to do with I don't know if father is the proper term.
Elder.
But when the elder shows up, that plays into them walking away and being distracted long enough.
Because they try to start a fire.
Oh yeah, they're pulling the rug and all that.
Pulling the rug, it's a whole thing.
But when they get back, I'm pretty sure Paxton's the one who notices that
Paxton's the one who notices
the lady's in a different position than she was before, and Barnes is kind of just well, no, she's not. You're overreacting, and Barnes is so focused on what she's trying to do to escape or whatever that it kind of puts her at a disadvantage.
She loses her focus.
And I think because she comes so forward, Reed focuses on getting rid of her first. So it's an interesting twist for her to be the one outed, and then Paxton's on her own.
I didn't write it down, but this is also a key moment. So she ends up, what ends up happening is the prophet does end up waking up, and it's oh, and she's oh, this and that, and then he tells them, what is she saying? Tell me what she says so he can write it down or whatever. And I forget exactly what she says, but there's a key moment where she goes off script and she says something to the effect of, what is it like?
So what the prophet tells them is that what she saw on the other side, right? Which is essentially that there was a bright light and there was a conductor, and then trumpet sounding or something like that. And then at the end of her like spiel, which is actually pretty hard to like to decipher what she's saying, the prophet very clearly says, "It's not real."
Yeah, and then she ends up and then he ends up coming in, right? Like at that point.
Yeah. He leads her out of the room or something.
Yeah, because
like
he abruptly comes in, right?
Yeah. And then what did end up happening too at some point was, didn't in the room one of them got a handle on like a letter opener, right?
Yeah, so before they went downstairs, they got, it's a very sharp, like long letter. It was like it's like a dagger.
Like the V for Vendetta. So she got a dagger.
I think Sister Barnes gets it, but she tells Sister Paxton like, he's gonna expect something from me, so you have to do something.
Right.
Oh yeah, there was a word.
Magic underwear was the magic word. That when Barnes says that, then Paxton.
And I don't think they realized he could hear them at that point.
Probably.
I'm pretty sure they're close to the mic.
Probably. That's a good point.
Because when she goes to say magic underwear, that's right when Reed kills her. Before
slices her throat with the box cutter.
So I'm pretty sure he heard or had some kind of.
What I would also throw out there was another key moment that we briefly touched on for my cons, but didn't actually go into detail. So one of the big things was that they travel on bikes. And so whatever area they're in, I guess it's a far way because they have to ride a little bit and it's a lot of terrain. And so what was important to note was they locked up their bikes. When the leader went to go look for them and he left, he eventually found that there were no more bikes. They were gone, but they had a bike lock on the locks. And so Sister Barnes had the bike key in her jacket. So that was a big thing why they couldn't get out even immediately, even if they wanted to, was because even if they did, they couldn't get to their bikes because they needed their jackets, which he took into the other room.
Which means he had to have been watching.
And when they got into the library to get their jackets, originally before they realized they were locked in the second room, they ended up noticing that Paxton ended up having the key in her jacket versus Barnes, but Barnes was the one that put it in her jacket. So she knew somebody messed with their jackets. So whenever they decide to go after the antagonist, and he ends up killing Barnes, it's important to note that once he takes her out, obviously Paxton kind of backs down and he's like, all right, this is the only way out, and shows basically the most...
That's not what happens.
No, what happens.
When the two of them are having the conversation, when Barnes and Paxton are having the conversation about like the magic word, the magic underwear word or whatever, and they have the matches, they're trying to light them. Mr. Reed comes down and he like lights the match really quick and he puts the flame towards Paxton and then he puts the flame towards Barnes and he says, "Oh, one of y'all have a really big secret that you're keeping, XYZ." They have their conversation, their altercation or whatever. Reed slices Barnes' throat, and then when she's dead on the ground, he goes into her arm and she has a contraceptive scar where they placed it, and so he digs around in there and he pulls it out, and it's a contraceptive in her arm,
which they focused on her, like when they're first sitting at the table. The camera kind of.
Yeah. We can see the scar. And then he goes into this whole, what is it? It's not the butterfly effect. It's the butterfly.
There's a word for it.
I forgot. I remember.
He literally corrects her because she.
She said butterfly effect, and he corrects her. Anyways, it's apparently this ancient Chinese philosophy of like, am I a man dreaming of being a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming of being a man? Right. So like, it's a kind of like a, are we living in a simulation kind of thing is what eventually it comes out to be. And so Reed tells Paxton that this microchip in her arm, which we all know it isn't, is proof that Barnes is an NPC and not a real person. And so
even uses the phrase NPC.
And he goes into like a little bit of a character. Goes into a little bit of a spiel about that, but then Paxton is like, or he says like, "Do you believe me?" or something like that. Paxton's like, "No," and he goes, "Oh, what do you think happened then?" And then he's like, "What I think." She says, what I think happened is that when the elder came to like look for us, that there was somebody else who had switched the bodies, right? Somebody had taken the dead person who ate the pie and replaced them, and she points to the evidence about the head being a different way. And then she's like, so there has to be another door in the room. And Mr. Reed's like, okay, well, where is it? And he's checking all the walls, all that stuff. And then that's when Sister Paxton moves the table and notices that for whatever reason, there's a leak in the cellar. And so it's not, the cellar isn't flooding, so the water has to be going somewhere, and that somewhere is the door that they find.
Yeah, it's interesting that like Paxton, after the simulation theory thing, which he's like trying to tell her, like basically you're in the simulation, and he says something about like dying and coming back on the other side or something.
Yeah, and you'll see that it's
Trying to
not
draw
real or
into-
something like that. So
And then he said, like, if you want the truth, you gotta go down.
yeah, because essentially that's the only way out, right? And he tells her like, you only go down there if you are ready to know what the one true religion is.
Which I didn't realize when he's telling them, like, it didn't click to me that when they go down there that there is an escape and that it was that the whole time, which is going down there.
Mhm.
A few things I want to touch on before we move on to the ending.
Yeah, that's fine.
I do think it's interesting that, like, Mr. Reed, spends a lot of time off screen, which leads to, like, it works well to line up, like, the bikes disappearing or the lady getting switched off. Because even when they're, like, looking under the door frame, he, like, walks through the room and goes into a different room or a different door, which I didn't know there was another door.
There's a side door on one of the staircases, yeah.
Right. So that's interesting. And two, one of y'all mentioned it that like a big thing is the girls basically decide everything. They get to decide what door they go down or if they leave. And it's kind of like that the whole time. Like even when it comes to Paxton at the end,
Yeah.
like she's deciding to go down there. They decided to come into the house. So like, I guess, I don't know if that's like a moral thing for him. So he doesn't, because I'm pretty sure when we reach the end and she finds all the women locked up, that he mentions that like they decided to go there or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's the same cycle over and over with them, like the women he already has trapped there.
Probably.
Yeah, so that's what we end up finding out is that the prophets are not actually prophets. They're previous people that he's trapped in his game that I'm assuming went down in the cellar. The only difference was they didn't get to escape. Like they pretty much were stuck there.
They chose
to stay, which they did obviously. They also big note was she had to go through this flooded area that had all these wonky doors. And what it ended up happening was the final doors, like 2 or 3 doors she went through.
Yeah.
That all have almost like different themes, right? Like
Yeah.
every, I think almost religion
they're
had.
kind of like pagan themes.
Yeah,
or something
same
like that.
themes. And so she ended up getting to the last door and it had the bike lock on there. So that was an important note was I think him switching the keys in the jacket because I think T even points out like you knew I was going to be
Oh, she has
one
to unlock it, right?
that she was
Yeah.
going to be the one to unlock it. So he knew that Paxton was going to be the one that ended up making it through, which is crazy because nobody, I think, going into that movie from the beginning thought that Paxton was going to be the one that made it. And so she ends up going into that basically it looks like almost like a weird, like where they keep almost like flowers and stuff, like a not an atrium, but like a one of those rooms that has a bunch of like lights, fluorescent lights and stuff. But like they're
Yeah.
basically
And they have misters.
Misters,
to
yeah,
keep
they're
them cold.
keep them cold, and they have these prophets in the cages. And
Yeah.
they're-
So one of the things that I do want to point out about that room is that a little bit later on in the movie, in I guess what you can call Mr. Reed's like office, he has a picture or it's a print of like Dante's Inferno, and the last layer of hell in Dante's Inferno is frozen over, and so like the bottom of this like dungeon or whatever the heck is cold. Like it's supposed to keep them, cold and obedient and all these other things, just like how in Dante's Inferno, it's sitting over there. They're supposed to like, or I guess Satan is frozen from like I think it's the bottom down or something like that in the final layer of hell.
I do remember them focusing on the poster for that
Mhm.
because
Right.
they're like going through these different. The
And-
whole house is basically.
And she basically goes into her spiel, right? Of like she knew that she was going to be the one because she also spells out, you knew that's why I had the key, that's why I had this. And then she also, because he kept on asking her and prodding her, right? So do you know the true answer? Do you know the whatever? And she ends up finally like saying, well, what did he say? Like, how did you know, or how did whatever? And she finally spills it. Like, one of your prophets ended up basically
Going off
script, and then he gets upset, like, because he realizes that his game kind of got messed up because one of the prophets ended up kind of basically letting her in on, like, hey, this isn't real. Like, because I guess they must have all realized before then that they thought it was real, so they, whatever happened, and they got stuck there. But for her eyes are still open because she realizes that that's not the case.
Yeah. And so we haven't mentioned it yet, but here, this is where Sister Paxton cues us in that the one true religion is control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a big reveal, yeah, because that's what he was trying to push too, right?
He has a point here.
I agree. I think it did. I agree. But again, we're not.
Yeah. So then she ends up stabbing him right, like in the side or something.
Instead of the throat.
He's
like,
he stabs her in the side.
Yeah.
Later, I think.
Yeah, she stabs him in the throat. And so she runs off. We find out that the exit door to that room is actually the side door where the prophets came through originally, which we thought was it's like side of the doors. Yeah,
right, is what happened.
Ends up being like on the side of the stairwells of the basement stairwells. I like the shot. It's interesting. Again, kind of weird, but like similar to like almost like a mousetrap almost. Like you have her running through the different layers of the house or whatever you would call it, complex, and then it just kind of shows her because in his office I think there's also like a miniature version of his house, and she's running through it on the top layer trying to figure out how to get out, which eventually through that door she gets back into the library, which eventually leads her back down to the cellar because I think she's starting to realize there's really not a whole lot of ways out. And then that's when homie ends up making his grand re-entrance. He's somehow still alive after getting kind of hit in the neck, which is surprising to me. I don't know how you survive it for that long. But he's basically going after her, right? Like he's about to take her out with the box cutter again. Is that correct?
I think for the first time, right? Because she like sees she's back in the cellar, and then I don't remember exactly what happens, but she ends up turning around, and when she turns around, that's when he stabs her.
He stabs her, and then she looks like he's about to like overtake and finish the job, and then that's when surprise Barnes comes back and basically like finishes
him off with a plank of wood that has three nails in it, right? Just like the three.
Oh yeah, that was. And what was that from? She broke it before. That was her trying to get out originally, right? She broke something
from the window.
Yeah. So we'll get into it a little bit after we talk about the ending. But there's a lot of like symbolism in this movie that I thought was really good.
Yeah, a lot of that. You saw it twice, so I do think this moment when like Barnes appears to come back to life or whatever. I want to say that I think this reflects two doors for the audience where you either choose to believe that, so you have one version of the ending, or you choose to think that it's too good to be true, so you have a different version of the ending.
I think, I would say the last scene is that idea. I think this scene is reflective of what he was trying to show them at the beginning, which is the revival. Because in our opinion, she was dead. Like, she was out. Like, that was a lot of loss of blood. And then she came back again to save basically essentially her. So I think that was, in my opinion, it's exactly what he was trying to like kind of like, no, this is like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what I'm trying to show you, this miracle, and it happens to end him. Like, that's how he ends up getting kind of taken out. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's hard because
it's in the same area.
The question is, was Paxton already dead at that point?
That's what I think.
That's where the hard part is, because there's like, I know we're kind of just like smoothly transition into this.
That's fine.
But there is a moment earlier on, I think when one of the prophets or whatever, one of the older ladies, where somebody in the room mentions like, when you die, you see what you want to see, basically. It might have been
so then that conversation happens. That's, I think, one of the final debates that they have before they get into the cellar, or they're already in the cellar.
It's one of the debates.
It's one of the debates, but Sister Barnes basically gives us some of her lore, that she was a survivor for an E. coli outbreak that she had Taco Bell, where she had, as far as like her heartbeat goes, on paper she was dead. She was legally dead, but came back to life. Yeah. And when she was dead, you know what? Yes, it does happen when they're a cellar, because when she mentions that when she died, what she saw was exactly what the prophet had described. There being the conductor and all these other things. But then she's like, she's the one. Sister Barnes is the one that mentions like when you are in that state, your brain just floods a bunch of images of what you like. It does a bunch of crazy. I think they describe it as crazy.
Yeah.
For you to like whatever.
Which feels like foreshadowing to me, but of course there can be different.
But I still think at this point, I think she was still alive. I think it's when she gets to the very end.
Because do we ever see her
She's
escape?
outside.
Yes, she ends
Yeah,
up
we
going
see
through
her.
a-
We see her
but
go
does it-
through the window.
Yeah, she goes through.
Oh,
a
okay. That's right. I remember.
I think it's either
Yeah.
a window or a vent.
It's like a window vent combo where she gets out. And so I would say the reason I think that she was still alive there was because we get the actual like Inception ending at the very end where you don't know if she's escaped or not fully or she's really alive, because there was the symbolism back to what you talked about earlier, the butterfly, where she ends up like getting out. It's snowing because there was like, I mean, this huge blizzard. It's not like blizzard anymore, but it's like heavy snow on the ground. Like, and so she's out and she's like fading. Like she's definitely like, she's weak and she's kind of in and out of it. But she ends up like looking up to the sky, nothing. And then all of a sudden she closes her eyes and she opens it up again. And then there's a butterfly that ends up coming down, and again back to the whole butterfly whatever, and that ends up flying on her arm. And to me that was symbolism, thinking like, oh, they're trying to make that seem like that was her guardian angel or whatever.
Yeah.
Which was,
So basically what happens is that like I don't remember how they get into it, but there's like a little bit of a conversation about like it's like 3 sentences about reincarnation, but essentially what Sister Paxton says is that when she passes, you know what? Sister Barnes mentions that she mentions it earlier in the movie that her dad died. And then Reed is like, oh, has he tried to communicate with you from the other side? No. Oh, that's odd. And then so Sister Paxton, in order to like break the awkwardness of of like what just happened, she says when she dies, she wants to come back as a butterfly and land on her loved one's hands so that way they know it's her.
right. And so that ends up being what we get from the ending, which is her seeing, but again, it like appears out of nowhere. Like it literally just kind of like poof. And so it lands on her. So for me, that's why I thought she was potentially still alive, because she's seeing that butterfly land on her. So for her, it's like, oh, it's, Sister Barnes, because she just saved me and I'm out. But again, just as much as you see it, it quick pans or quick shots, like another like viewpoint, and the butterfly is not there, and it's just her, and then it's just like her by herself, and then it's like seen.
I heard someone comment that it wasn't snowing anymore. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, it wasn't snowing. That's what I was saying. It was snow, but it wasn't snow. It was something
So it like breaks out of right.
out of the blizzard, which I mean that's possible. I mean it was heavy. I mean it was like, it's gonna stop at some point. But to me, I think if she ended up not making it, that's where it happened. I think she did quote unquote escape, but she didn't make it. Like she got into the snow, and then what you're saying, that which your mind's gonna see what it wants to see, which for her, she wants to see a loved one, show her that like she's she's there. But with how the camera worked, where the butterfly was just gone instantaneously, like you didn't see it fly away. It wasn't like, fluttering off to the side. Like it was there, and then it was like clear change of shot, and it was gone, and it's just her by herself. And it looked like she was like kneeling or like kind of hunched over, and then it was like seen.
I think you make a good point, because it is true that like when they're down there, either one, you can view like Barnes coming back to life as a miracle, or maybe she had one burst of energy, like she wasn't fully dead or whatever. But I do think you're right. I think
possible.
that was the hard part for me, is because that part, I don't know, Barnes coming back to life or whatever and killing him felt pro-religious to me. But then with the ending, it kind of leaves it up to.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I think you, like you're saying, it's an equal balance, right? Like they're balancing it out. Like there's a lot of like kind of maybe potentially anti, but then with some of the things that happened with the characters,
like
you could
pro.
almost think of it pro. And I don't know, I kind of like it in the happy middle, because again, just like the Doors, like you were alluding to at the beginning of the podcast, like whichever direction you go, it's all going to end up to the same point, but it doesn't necessarily mean the viewpoint is any different. I think like you had said, like the viewpoint can be different based off of who's viewing it, but the fact that you have the choice, I think, is what is nice, because you can get to the same place but still have a different viewpoint, even though you have two different places.
And I did see online. No, I listened to the Dead Meat podcast over Heretic, and in there they say that they saw something online where the house essentially like represents like life, right? How everybody enters, because there's only one doorway in the house, that everybody enters the same way, and we all end up in the same place in the end, which is the cellar. Which is why I think that Paxton died at the end.
I also don't. They also didn't save those people. So those people were still in the cellar.
Yeah, they're all in the cellar.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, they're still in the cellar.
Right, which is again, it's this weird balance of like.
Well, no, she throws the keys at them, right? She gives them the key.
Oh, maybe she
I
does.
don't
Yeah, she does. She steals the key from him, and I think she gives it to him. Just like, just unlock
Get out
it.
on your own.
Just
Yeah.
she's like, get out on your own.
I know she could have finished the job on him, but anyway, that would ruin the plot.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And then even like if she did escape,
It's ever a horror movie ever.
like it still does it really matter if she dies or not? And yeah. it's
Yeah,
interesting.
no, yes, I hear what you're saying. From my point of view, it's whenever Reed stabs Paxton, everything after that point is from her point of view.
See, that was
it's,
my
it's her
understanding.
brain, like
That's why to
making
me I
all
wasn't
of
sure if
these-
Barnes actually came back or not.
Yeah.
It's like I understand how like there's a different point for you, and I think part of it is that we don't know, and we're never gonna know. Like the director's not gonna come out and say it, and
He did. Let me actually pull it up. He did.
that's good.
We called him right now.
But I think that's a good thing with endings like this is it leaves room for conversation instead of having like, no, they kill him and they escape and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah,
Like,
I would say with this one, I felt a little bit more at like peace with the potential like cliffhanger, if you will, because there's other movies that do the same exact thing and it makes me angry because I'm like, that was like a cop out. But I don't think this one was because of how they played it out and the sequence and how they did it.
it lines up
I
with the
think-
rest of the movie.
Yeah, it almost like again, it almost like
So-
is like is a neutrals right in the middle of like
Yeah.
you could go one way or another, and it just depends on your interpretation. You all got there the same way, but it's different viewpoints.
It's all for the audience, yeah.
Like Inception, like I did not like the ending of Inception. I think when it first came out, I
Never seen
hated it.
Yeah,
I hated
see, I've
it.
never seen
It's
Inception
a
either.
cliffhanger. It basically is like, is he still in the dream or not? And he has like a tell, and it pans to where like, oh, is it gonna do the thing? And then like cuts, and then like you don't know, and it's just like really like that's lame. And the people are like, oh well, I kind of. It's like no, you didn't. You don't lie.
I think. Oh, go for it.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, it was just a bad. I say it's bad. People love that movie. Honestly, looking back at it now, I don't hear as many people talking about it. So maybe it wasn't a good movie. Maybe just people hyped it when it came out, and then it really wasn't a good movie.
Yeah, there are some endings like that fall short though.
Yeah, I think this one did hit the mark because the way it played out and the theming of how it did everything.
And I feel like another great movie this year that did that. It's a completely different circumstance, but like Late Night with the Devil ending where like it's kind of trippy and like you don't really understand what's going on. Like you do, but it's kind of up for you.
I think did we decide it was like, did the girl actually do it or was it him all along?
Yeah.
That was our big debate, right? And I don't even think I ever got a true answer for that. I don't even know if the director ever came out and said yay or nay, but I think usually when you go that route, you usually just kind of leave it up for interpretation. I think it's the same with, no, it's not the same with Cuckoo, but like there was some aspects of that too where the director just kind of like, there was things you're not going to understand, you have to accept that you're not going to understand. It's like,
Yeah.
what? Yeah.
So
Was any of this real? Is the movie or
was the movie real?
They were sleeping.
He actually was an Oompa Loompa. He wakes up and he's still Wonka.
That's why he's eating candy the whole time.
I need a number 2. No, actually don't make a number 2. Well, make a Wonka.
You know,
too.
Wonka too.
I need a Wonka too.
I mean, I'm pretty sure
I
that's
love
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
But is it the Johnny Depp?
It is the
one?
Johnny Depp one. It has to be the Johnny Depp one.
I agree. This is a bag I don't know if y'all want to open. I took notes on is it a horror movie or not, just to have there.
So that was the debate that
Yes.
we had. I said no, and the only reason being I felt like there were horror elements towards the end, but not in the sense of like, I think it's strictly thriller. It has a few horror things, but I don't think enough to be like, ooh, scary. It's just a good thriller. Like, I mean, you're on the edge of your seat. You're on the
What's not scary about a man kidnapping women and keeping them in his basement?
I mean, you don't find that out to the end, but at that point, it's too late to be scared. I mean, at that point, you went along for the ride at that point. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it just, I don't know. Like, it wasn't like scary. It was just, and again, I know not all horror movies are scary, but I think it was still more of a thriller. Like, you had just as much suspense and potentially things that were like, ooh, spooky on other movies that are strictly thriller, and that's exactly what they say. You know what I mean?
I think if it was only the first half, I would accept that it's only a thriller. I think the second half is where, And I think like I don't want to say a cop out, but like maybe the reason it doesn't hit as horror is because none of the supernatural elements are actually real. But like
That's
I
also,
think
that's
it's
also
just a
true.
lot
So
of-
then
I don't know. It has like it's gory. It has like okay, a bunch of different film genres have murders, but I feel like they're murders I would consider horror murders.
like assuming every true crime or is it true crime podcast? True crime. Yeah, true crime podcast. They basically.
I feel like
is
the
horror.
atmosphere. Yeah, I feel like the atmosphere is horror.
Yes, that one I agree with.
It has the final girl trope, which it has to have, of course. It's it's aimed to scare, or like there's this tension throughout it. It's meant to be unsettling.
Can I throw a funny note out there? Was I'm totally
yes,
off topic.
Saw is a horror movie.
Saw's not a movie. All right, so totally off topic. But somebody had posted it. I just thought it was funny. I've never seen the movie, but like that new Netflix movie that just came out was the Hot Santa or whatever. I guess one of the things was this lady like poking holes at it was like because he puts on the scarf, the snowman turns into a human, but like the snowman is like. Before they put it on is like super ripped, like it looks like the statue of David.
I saw
basically.
this movie.
Yeah. Oh, you saw it? Okay. And so I guess one of the running themes is like he learns how to be a carpenter because he just watches HGTV, but he becomes like an expert carpenter. And they go, what happens if the first thing he got into was true crime podcast, and like he would basically turn into a serial killer. And like what?
I need that spin-off.
I need that.
Yeah, I'm like also watching.
They're Jack Frost. That literally did. And you want to watch it? Hey, that's the next movie. All right, Jack Frost.
It's funny-
Did you ever see that one?
Because the snowman like has this movie or the snowman gets this thing, like this coat. He goes into.
Did he like not wear a shirt either? Like
No,
that's like his whole.
but it says like Jack on it, so it's like meant to be. Yeah, he also watches like cooking shows on TV, and he's like making
an
dinners.
expert.
Yeah.
That's
Maybe that's what Mr. Reed.
No, I'm talking about the horror Jack Frost. I'm not talking about the actual Jack Frost.
Um,
The one where he like hits snow and like radioactive waste, and he basically fuses with the snow and becomes a radioactive snowman.
I don't know if y'all want to comment on horror or not anymore. I think either way, it's a good movie, so I'm gonna say.
I mean, yeah, I know your stance is horror, but I think, I don't know. I can't sit here and say there's a certain criteria box because everything's a little bit different, but I still think that leans more towards thriller than horror. And I feel like you could make a better case for like a lot of the A24 movies being more horror, which is fine. Like I could sit there and honestly say that yes, what is that stupid movie that I hate? Midsummer. That is a horror movie because there's horror elements for a majority of it. Like, I almost feel like it's like the 3/4 rule. It needs to be like 3/4 horror, or else it's not horror. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's a good rule of thumb. It needs to be at least 3/4 horror.
Hey, Hereditary is another one of those movies that has a weird ending.
It's stupid.
So
ending.
great.
It's
I like
not
Hereditary.
great. And guess what? There was just a naked cult, and it's like what?
Now, Midsummer's bad.
That was
That movie
pretty bad.
I fell asleep like 3 times. So 2025 is all about A24 versus Neon. Or what?
Neon's been doing alright.
I like A24.
What was this one? Is it A24?
It's
A24.
A24?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one was good.
What
Well,
was Late Night?
that's why it was good because it wasn't.
Neon, I
I
think.
think it was Neon.
I don't know. Actually, so many people had their hands in late night.
Yeah,
That had, like, 20
the one that had, like 20 intros. Yeah, I was like, what the
I'm sure we all had the experience where like people in the theater were laughing or
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
just kept going.
But yeah, so speaking of so we're getting towards the end of the year. What were your top three movies for this year?
Spoiler alert, the last thing we went through this, so like I kind of figured we already kind of went through this, but the audience doesn't know. My three, I think, still stay intact. It's gonna be in no particular order. Late Night, then I think I had said Long Legs, and then the last one, oh man, how did I forget the last one? It was another like pretty easy pick.
I want to say I don't know if it was Smile or not. So.
Yeah, it was Smile 2. I thought Smile 2 was
Smile
good.
2 was good. I don't know why. I still don't know why. Like so many people didn't like it. Like I thought it was.
I really liked it. I wish they would have showed more at the end.
You
But
mean they show the close up of the underwear more? the poop state.
no, when she does the microphone thing, I don't like that it stays on the audience for so long.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the point. Like, I don't think they want. Did they show the? Well, yeah, the other one was just basically she just basically had the knife, right? That was basically it. She didn't do anything too crazy.
I thought she set herself on fire.
Oh, the first one?
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah.
That movie had another. I don't want to say because the ending was pretty straightforward. What ended up happening, but that one had a big plot twist.
I think-
where like
Yeah.
My worry is, and I think I don't think we're ever going to touch it, but my worry with Smile was that if the idea was like now it's going to be viral, right? Like
I don't know if they can make a third one.
You're not. I don't think they should make a third one.
unless they're gonna do the prequel.
Well, I don't
That's where it
think.
all-
Yeah, you almost have to do a prequel, but I don't think they should because there's too many people, and I think you've already established in the second one that there's no winning. Like you can't win. Like there's
Yeah.
no getting around it. You can't escape it. So at that point, once you've established that there actually is no way to beat it, then you can't make any more. I think that's where It Follows was good, and even though the third act sucked, but like they ended knowing that like yes, you're not going to beat it, and we don't need to make any more movies because there's no point. Like that's just end all be all, cut it. You know what I mean? Where they didn't learn their lesson was like Freddy and Jason. And all that. It's like oh, they're coming back, and it's like
That's so funny.
and I don't think the entity is not something that like is like a interesting character. It's just like the story and the whole idea of like the environment that it sets, and I don't think you can't replicate that too many more times without getting stale. And I think that's where they're at. Like they're gonna get stale if they try to make anything more past two.
Jordan, what were your top three?
I'm gonna stay with the same one.
That's fine.
Terrifier 3, which I didn't think would be on my top 3. I'm gonna do Late Night with the Devil also, which I think we're all gonna agree on. And then I gotta give flowers. I know Adam's gonna hate this. I'm sticking with In a Violent Nature.
That is so
In a Violent Nature was good.
That's bad.
That was good. Would you want to see In a Violent Nature, but from the perspective of Mr. Reed?
Do I? No, because he just literally be sitting there half the time.
Exactly. That's why the movie had to be made.
The movie's bad.
Again, in no order. Although that might be the order. Terrifier 3, Late Night, and then In a Violent
I don't know how you
Nature.
could put that above Smile. Like that is just interesting to me.
Honorable mention, The Stranger.
That's even worse. I think that's pretty
Honorable
bad.
mention, The Strangers. Honorable mention for myself would have to be Terrifier 3. I feel like I have to take it out of the running just to give another movie a chance or whatever. But I would agree. I just really liked Late Night. Late Night with the Devil. Alien Romulus.
That's right.
For two very big reasons. The first one is the lead, Kaylee Spaney, I think her name is like phenomenal in her role, and the director, whose name I'm forgetting, but he also was the director for Evil Dead Rise, and I love Evil Dead Rise.
To Ridley Scott?
No, he's a producer. The director, Fede Alvarez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Alien was a really good movie. It's this weird, like, we talked about it in the deleted episode. But yeah, I honestly think it's better than some of the movies I have in the top 3. It's just this weird, like, I do think it's a horror movie. I'm not arguing that it's not. In my mind, I don't categorize. I don't know. It's weird.
He doesn't think sci-fi is horror.
I really like it, but in my mind, there's better movies. There's movies that do horror better. In this mind, it's like a sci-fi.
Yeah,
But it's in my top 3 of the year.
You know what's so funny to me? Like, I don't think I think any sci-fi movie is like scary. I think the closest one is maybe The Thing, but outside of that, like, there's really not a whole lot of sci-fi. It's like, ooh,
Alien's kind of a slasher when you think of it.
yeah.
It is, yeah.
Like I rewatched The Thing a couple of weeks ago.
Which one? New one or the OG?
Oh, the OG is actually a remake. Because there's a black and white one, and then there's John Carpenter. You see? Yeah, there's John Carpenter, and then there's the remake.
Next season, we're doing the.
Yeah.
Because the newest one's a prequel.
Right. But John Carpenter's, I rewatched it. I was like, what the hell? Like, you have to remember, like, I saw that movie when I was like, in the single digits as far as my age goes.
Yeah, his dad basically was like, here, put this movie on. Just like any movie.
Watch this.
Watch this. We would watch
Blood in, blood out.
sit there for however long. No, we would. He was funny. We were allowed to watch Saw, Evil Dead, all these other stuff, but we weren't allowed. But we weren't allowed to watch Austin Powers.
Yeah.
But I rewatched The Thing, and it was really good. I was like, holy crap!
I have to rewatch it again, but I would almost
it is dated. Like,
Yeah.
you have to
Invasion of the Body Snatchers is still really good. I think I mentioned that earlier on in one of our podcasts. That one, and that one's also a remake of one that was even earlier, and that one was really good. Like I think that one had Leonard Nimoy. It had what's your boy, the wizard, your boy the
There's
wizard.
a lot of wizards.
No, the wizard.
Saruman.
No.
Gandalf?
No,
Talking about
wizard.
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum.
No, the wizard
The wizard.
of Oz. You should have said the Wizard of Oz.
No, it's not the Wizard of Oz. It's the
Oh,
wizard.
okay.
Yeah, Michael Jackson. All right. So, basically, yeah, no, but that one is really good. A little dated in some aspects, but I think some of the practical effects still hold up, and it's kind of interesting. I like how the premise of that one, right? Like the idea that basically the species comes in and they take over our bodies, but like they don't actually take over our bodies. They make clones of us, and they basically suck the life out of us, and so they end up slowly taking over the world because you don't know that they're kind of like the thing, right? Until it's too late, and then they take you, and then eventually they just take over the world because it's pretty cool, and it has the most iconic horror movie ending of all time. It is the greatest ending. It's still
Invasion of Body Snatchers.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, well, so just a little quick bit about the thing, and then I'll give my when I was watching the thing, Joyce had walked into the room, and she was like, "What are you watching?" And I said, "I'm watching Among Us the movie."
Yeah, basically.
Now I gotta go watch it. I didn't know John. I'm not gonna say that out loud. At least I didn't know John Carpenter made other movies.
Yeah.
Hey, stick to the soundtracks, buddy.
So late night. Sorry.
Alien.
Oh, I know your third one now.
Yes. So honorable mention: Terrifier 3, Late Night with the Devil is probably number 3, Alien number 2, and then number 1 is The Substance.
Oh, it's not Long Legs. I forgot it was The Substance.
The Substance was
I'm not the only one who left Long Legs out.
A1. Oh, Long Legs too. Long Legs was
Probably
Long Legs was
honorable.
very
Let
good.
me in now.
I need to rewatch it. That's another one that kind of I got confused a little bit.
Yeah, I really liked Long Legs.
I didn't get. No, it was pretty straightforward. It was just like
I didn't know how
it kind of caught me off guard because I mean you couldn't think of it, right? Like
Yeah.
you didn't think that was the case until they obviously reveal it. But I thought that was.
I don't know if I'm satisfied with the ending. That's what I say.
Oh yeah, I know some people hated it. I also know some people hated the main actress, like the protagonist, because they're like she's devoid of emotion and this and that. It's like that's the point. Yeah, that's the point of her character. Like she actually played the character to a T.
Yeah.
And you like couldn't separate yourself from that fact that like you're just a boring actor. It's like no, that's the way that actors
She's
are actually supposed to play it. Yeah.
But The Substance, I know not a whole lot of people got to watch it. It was an indie film. It was amazing. If you ever get the chance to watch it, it's great. If you're, it's like your favorite movie, Midsummer, how it was made for the girlies. Yeah, the Substance is the same way. It deals a lot with more issues that women have in society that men don't, and I thought it was.
No, I need to watch it. Is it on streaming yet?
I think you can rent it, but
No, which one's about to come out? There's something that was about to come out. I was like, oh, I need to watch it when it comes out.
I know we still got a month.
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
We're ranking our top 3. We still got a month.
Yeah, I know.
Nosferatu. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Me too.
I think it has the possibility, but I'm gonna wait on it and to see because I don't know. Like I'm gonna say, homie hasn't hit too many home. Like what was the last home run he hit?
Show me.
The dude that's playing Nosferatu.
Oh, Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah. His last one
The
flopped.
Crow.
The Crow. No, actually, both flopped. The Crow flopped, and the one where he's basically the third person, but he's basically being voiced by Bob's Burgers. Yeah, like that kind of flopped too. I didn't realize. I forgot that came out, and it's already streaming. And I was like, I don't remember hearing anything about this movie. Like, and I think I started watching it. It was okay, but I was like, man, they didn't even let my dude like voice act. Like, straight up just do the dude from Bob's Burgers.
And Nosferatu has Defoe in it.
Yeah,
He carried Beetlejuice too.
He was not even like
He was hitting them cop poses.
the cop poses. You know what was funny? I still think what was another movie that did the same thing? I was just thinking about this, where you had a character that somewhat like had like people adore and love, and yet doesn't have very much screen time, but yet you put all your eggs into that basket. Like Beetlejuice, like when you time it, I think in each movie he's only on screen for a total of like 15 minutes. For like an hour and a half plus movie, he's only on the screen for 15 minutes. Yet that's what everybody remembers. Nobody really remembers everything else other than like that main character, and it's always funny to think. But I was trying to remember, there's another movie that just came out that had the same thing, and I'm like, they were hardly in this movie. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, you know what it was? It's not a recent movie. I'm sorry, not horror theme, but I was watching The Godfather because I was like, these are movies I hadn't ever finished, and then I realized after they're watching the first one, I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me that like The Godfather wasn't even in most of the movie? Like he got gunned down early, wasn't on screen that much at the beginning, and then dies at the end of the first one. I was like, what in the world? And so, but everybody, when you think of that movie, you relate to him, like you relate to Marlon Brando, but it's actually an Al Pacino movie. It's actually really Al Pacino's movie. But and that's crazy. I like never realized that until I actually sat and watched the entire movie. I was like, that's crazy. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. But same thing, right? Like you just think of that one person. He is the Godfather. You don't really think about
how long is Longlegs in Long?
How long is Longlegs?
He's a decent amount. It's not like, but he didn't have a whole lot either. I think he sent his entire voiceover script like on a Apple phone notes to the director like after getting the script for like a couple of days. Like he said he sat there for like an hour and just like recorded himself doing all the lines. So he wasn't in there for very much if he could do that.
I think that's common in horror though. Like where you have the main guy, like right, like Michael or Freddy or whatever. Art is an exception because he's in it a lot, but like a lot of those people only touch like 20 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It depends. I feel like Jason's in it a decent amount. More than 15.
I feel like slashers are a little bit of a different, just because
they
they're
have
the
to
one.
boogeyman, they have to hide.
Like, but see, like Michael Myers kind of just pops out to kill.
Oh, I think the last one.
You're right, because Freddy's a big part of it. Yeah. We don't count the last one.
I mean, Leprechaun was in the movie a decent amount.
Killer Clowns.
So the reason why we're talking about our top 3 now is because we have come to the end of our first season. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, this first season's been fun for us. I've really enjoyed our time. So we'll be back towards the end of January. Not sure what we'll be coming out with. But yeah, so until then, I guess y'all have a good day. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the algorithm stuff. And we'll see you next. Bye.